how does it sounds running private cloud in public cloud? That would be interesting. So welcome back everyone to my channel. I am Dinuth. Thank you so much for joining in. Today I'm going to showcase how to run a VMware private cloud environment in public cloud. Azure VMware Solution, which is referred to as Azure AVS, would be a great option for you to seamlessly move VMware based workloads from your on-premises data center to Azure public cloud. You can keep managing your existing environments with the same VMware tools that you already know while you modernize your applications with Azure native services. Furthermore, the good thing is Azure VMware Solution is a Microsoft service verified by VMware that runs on Azure infrastructure. So during this video, you are going to learn everything that you should know on how to provision your own private cloud environment in Azure. I will walk you through with the prerequisites to provision the AVS environment in your Azure subscription, creating the AVS private cloud, and how to access the private cloud environment using multiple ways, such as using the wide area network Dinuth rules, as well as creating the ExpressRoute connections with the vNet gateways, and many more. So without further ado, let's jump into the video. If you are new to my channel, don't forget to hit the subscribe button with the bell sign, and let's start the video. Prerequisites. When it comes to the prerequisites to set up the Azure VMware Solution, you need to have an Azure subscription. But all the Azure subscriptions are not eligible to create Azure AVS private cloud. Your Azure subscription must have Azure Enterprise Agreement with Microsoft, or it needs to be a Cloud Solution Provider CSP managed subscription. You can find out this by going into the Azure subscription view and checking the offer details there. In this example, I have the enterprise agreement enabled in my subscription. Then you need to enable Azure AVS Resource Provider in the subscription by going into the Resource Provider section under the subscription settings. You can search for AVS here and select Microsoft.avs Resource Provider and make sure it is in the registered state. If it is not registered, just select and click on the register button. The next step is you need to request for host quota to provision the AVS private cloud. In your Azure portal, under the help and support section, create a new support request with the issue type, technical, and then select the subscription. Under the Azure VMware Solution service, you need to ask a general question asking for the additional host quota or capacity for your AVS private cloud. You need to provide more details about your environment, whether this is a POC or production environment, what is the region you are going to use, number of hosts, whether you are going to connect this to your on-premise with the ExpressRoute. Likewise, the good thing is Azure provide AV36 3 nodes completely free of charge for a month to try out AVS private cloud functionality. When you have completed all of these prerequisites, you are good to start provisioning AVS private cloud in your Azure subscription. Now we are going to provision AVS private cloud. To provision AVS private cloud, search for the Azure VMware Solution under the services and click on Create AVS Private Cloud button. This is where you need to provide all the details to provision your VMware environment. Select the subscription, then I need to select a resource group for this resource, or else you can create a new resource group as well. Then select the region, provide a name for your VMware private cloud. Then you can select VM SKU, AV36 trial nodes as well as AV36 paid nodes as well. I have both. I'll proceed with the trial nodes. Based on the number of nodes, you can see the estimated monthly cost as well. Then you need to provide the address block for the private cloud management services such as vCenter and NSX-T manager. You need to use /22 size for the address space. When you are deciding this address block, make sure it does not overlap with your vNet or your on-premises CIDR blocks. In the virtual network section, I will keep it empty and I will let AVS service to create its own networking internally, which makes my setup simpler. Now you can set some tags for this deployment. Click on next to go into the review and create. Now it will validate all the details that you have provided, and you can click on create button to provision our AVS private cloud. Now the deployment is in progress. This can take around 2 hours to get completed. Grab a coffee and I'll pause the video here and start it back when it is completed. Now we are back. The deployment is completed successfully. Under my resource group, I can see my private cloud instance. To view the connectivity details, go into the Manage section, Connectivity panel. You can see the CIDR ranges for vMotion and Private Cloud Management Network here. You can also enable internet connectivity as well with this toggle. Under the Identity panel, you can find out the vCenter and NSX-T manager URLs and the credentials. To get access into the vCenter and NSX-T manager, let's create a jump VM or else a Bastion VM in the same resource group. Go into the resource group, click Add and click Marketplace. Let's create a Windows VM here. So I'm searching for Windows 10. Click on Create. Provide a name for the VM and you can select a region. Then provide the administrator credentials, the username and password. Keep the RDP enabled because we need to RDP into this machine and click Next. I'll go ahead with the default disk configuration here. Going Next. Under networking, I'm creating a new vNet. Keep in mind, this is my Bastion vNet. This is completely different from my AVS private cloud's underlying networking. Clicking on the Create New Virtual Network button, provide a CIDR block which is not overlapping with your AVS CIDR range. I'm using 10.175.4.0/22. Then I'm adding 2 subnets. One is gateway subnet. The other one is the default subnet. I'm going to place my Bastion VM in the default subnet. Gateway subnet will be used for the gateway functionalities to establish our vNet gateway in the latter part of this video. Create a new public IP as well for this Bastion VM to access this directly from my laptop through RDP. Click in Next. No changes needed in the Management tab. Click Next. No changes needed here. Click Next. Provide some tags. Click Next. Review the details and click on Create. This will create Bastion vNet as well as the Bastion VM. Take a note of the Bastion IP address here. We need it for the later configurations. In this scenario, my Bastion IP is 20.51.191.209. AVS public IP configuration. To enable the connectivity from the Bastion VM to AVS private cloud, let's now try out the first approach with the public IP integration. At the end of this configuration, you will be able to access the private vCenter and NSX-T manager using a public IP address from our Bastion server. This will create a virtual wide area network in a new resource group. You can change the resource group and provide a name for the WAN. I'm going ahead with the default values. For the virtual hub IP block, I will use another non-overlapping IP range, 10.175.8.0/22. Here I'm creating two public IPs. One of the IP address I'm going to use it for the vCenter, the other one is for the NSX-T manager. You can add new public IPs later as well. Now click on create. This will take around 1 hour to get completed. Now the deployment is completed. Under the public IP section in the AVS connectivity panel, you can see the WAN resource group as well as the WAN name. Go to the WAN. You can see the hub is there and the IP address of the hub is the IP range that we have provided. Click on the hub. Let's go into the firewall manager. There you can see two IP addresses that you have requested. Take a note of these two IP addresses because we need it for the later part of the configuration. If you want to expose any other services from AVS environment to the internet, you can add more IP addresses here as well. If you go back into the firewall manager, under the Azure firewall policies, create a new firewall policy. Provide a name for this policy and the region. Then click next. Click next again. Under the rules, create a new rule collection for this Bastion vCenter access. This needs to be a Dinuth rule collection type. You need to create two Dinuth rules to allow the access for both vCenter and NSX-T. Let's create one rule for the moment for vCenter. Provide a rule name. Source type needs to be IP address. As the source, I need to allow traffic only from my Bastion IP rather than exposing it to the internet worldwide. The protocol is TCP. Destination ports, I'll use 443 because this is a HTTPS service. Destination IP is one of the public IP from WAN. 52.147.214.189. I'll use that IP. Translated IP should be my vCenter IP address. You can find out the vCenter IP address under the identity section under our AVS private cloud. vCenter is on 10.175.0.2. Then you need to use the translation port 443. Click on create and wait for the deployment to get completed. When the deployment is completed, you need to associate this firewall policy with your WAN hub in the firewall manager. In the firewall manager, under security providers, add the firewall policy that you have created. In the same way, you can create another rule as well for the NSX-T manager IP address. So go back into the firewall policy, Dinuth rules. Let's rename the previous rule name to Bastion vCenter here. Now add the second rule for the NSX-T manager. Provide a name for this rule. Source IP address of my Bastion. Destination IP is the second IP address added to the WAN configuration. Protocol is TCP. Destination port 443. Translated to IP address of NSX-T manager private IP. Translated port is 443. After the deployment is completed, RDP into the Bastion server and try to access the vCenter using the public IP over HTTPS. We can see the vCenter getting started page is loading correctly. Click on the launch vSphere client. vCenter is trying to show the authentication page, but getting an issue due to DNS resolution. Let's resolve it later. Let's check the NSX-T manager over the second public IP address. Getting the authentication page. You can get the credentials from the identity tab in the AWS private cloud and enter it. You can see NSX-T manager is accessible without any issues. You can see there are multiple resources created for me already, and then there is a tier 0 gateway configured. There is a tier 1 gateway as well. If we go to the system fabric, we can see all 3 EXXI nodes are configured as the NSX-T as transport nodes. 2 edge transport nodes are also created for you. Now let's go back into the vCenter access issue. Let's do a NS lookup to find out the domain IP mapping. According to the NS lookup, this domain is mapped to the same vCenter private IP address. So what we have to do is, rather than using the private IP, we can use the public IP and map it for this domain name. We can manually add this DNS mapping into our Bastion VM's host file. In Windows, host file is inside C, Windows, System32, drivers, etc. host location. Let's open this in a notepad with the administrator privileges. Add a new entry to map the DNS to the public IP address of the vCenter. Right. Now we need to load the new entry. Let's do a DNS flush with the ipconfig/flush DNS command. Now it's time to access vCenter again. Here we go. We can see the login page without any issues right now. Let's log in with the username and the password. Here we go. We can access the vCenter. 3 EXXI nodes are available here. Now you have access into vCenter. You can deploy your own virtual machines and start using VMware environment right now. With the WAN approach, for every service that you want to expose, need to have a public IP assigned. But there is a quota of maximum public IPs that you can assign for your WAN configuration. What if you want to access all private IP addresses in the AWS environment? Then the best option is to use the vNet gateway integration with ExpressRoute. Under the AWS Private Cloud Connectivity panel, go to the ExpressRoute tab. You can see the ExpressRoute details here. Especially, you can see the private peering ID here. With the private peering ID, you can generate an authorization key for this integration. I have already created an authorization key here. You need to note down the peering ID and the authorization key for the next set of configuration. Then you can go into the virtual network gateway service. I have already created the virtual network gateway here, but I will show you the exact steps. You can click on add button. You can select the subscription. Provide a name for your vNet gateway. Select your region. Gateway type needs to be ExpressRoute in this scenario. SKU can be standard. Under the virtual network, you need to select the Bastion vNet because you are going to connect your Bastion vNet into this AWS private cloud. Create a new IP address for this integration. Then click on create. This is how the created vNet gateway look like. You can go into the connection panel This is where you establish the connectivity from the vNet gateway into your AWS private cloud. I have already created the connectivity. That's what you see here. You can add the connections by clicking on add button. You can provide a name. Connection type needs to be ExpressRoute. Tick redeem authorization. Now you can provide the authorization key and the peering circuit URL copied from the AWS connectivity ExpressRoute tab. Then click on OK. Now the connectivity is established from the Bastion vNet into the AWS private cloud. Let's go back into the Bastion VM and try to access vCenter and NSX-T manager using the private IP addresses. Trying out vCenter. vCenter is accessible. Let's try to log in. It works perfectly. Now let's try to access NSX-T manager with the private IP. Yes, it is accessible. Let's try to log in. Right. We can log in without any issues. That's how you use vNet gateway with the AWS private cloud to access all the private IP addresses directly. Right, now we have reached the end of this video. It was a little bit lengthy video, but in this video I walk you through the prerequisites to set up the AWS in your Azure subscription. Then we created AWS private cloud. Afterwards I demonstrated the public IP integration with the wide area network and how to configure your firewall with the Dinuth rules to restrict that vCenter and the NSX-T access. As well as you can use that methodology if you have some applications deployed in your AWS private cloud environment. You want to expose it to the internet, you can use the same method. At last, I demonstrated how to access the AWS private IP ranges directly from your Bastion vNet itself by creating the vNet gateway and integrating it with the Azure ExpressRoute integration. I hope this video was informative for you. Thank you so much for coming this far. So if you like this video, don't forget to hit the like button and share with others. Subscribe to my channel with the bell sign for more videos like this. So I'm Dinuth signing off. Goodbye everyone. Let's meet you in another video. Bye bye.